Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Jim Knight. Jim is a renowned keynote speaker, author, training and development expert who teaches organizations of all sizes how to attain their own rock star status. An experienced professional, having led global training for Hard Rock International for 2 decades, Jim customized programs and shows how to amp up organizational culture, deliver world-class differentiated service, and build rock star teams and leaders. Jim put his experience and creativity to work with consistently developing cutting-edge training concepts. During his time at the Hard Rock brand, his team won coveted video Telly Awards, garnered Training Directors Forum's prize for the Reengineering Training, and won Brandon Hall's Gold Best in Class Award for their Service Recovery e-learning course. Jim was also recognized by Training Magazine as representing one of the top 125 training companies in the world out of all industries and businesses. He has since been featured in Forbes Magazine, Inc. Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, Nation's Restaurant News, Business News Daily, and Fox Business News. So let's rock on and welcome Jim Knight to the show. Jim, welcome.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate what you've done. And what's interesting is the way you went about it. As having all those awards, those accolades, it's nice. And it shows your breadth of what you can do. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
But let's get to who you are. Let's tell people who you are, because I think our listeners would like to know, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words too. Certainly my background probably helped get me to where I am. It certainly was a long and winding road. I actually went to school to be a musician. I thought I was going to be a rock and roll star. I do have a music degree actually, but all of my music stuff was very classically trained, choral, church music. I could do a wedding or a funeral today if I had to. But I don't get called up on stage with all of my cool, fun rock and roll friends when you have that type of a stylized voice. So, and I also discovered while I was there that I think to make a living, really, you had to be awesome. You had to be a monster at that. And I wasn't that great. I mean, I was okay. I was adequate. But I decided that I needed to make some money at some point. So I became a middle school teacher. I did that for 6 years in public education. Absolutely loved that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It was
Middle
a
school
little bit
is
of
tough.
a war.
Yeah.
I did go to war. Yeah. First person somebody said that. That's hilarious. And then I took a night job working at Hard Rock, like you said. I mean, there's other jobs that were in the middle of all that stuff, but those are really the 3 tenets. It's my music background, really in public education, and then my real foray into hospitality was taking a summer job. I was a host at a restaurant seating people, but at that time it was the busiest restaurant in the entire world. We were doing something like 7,000 people a day, pumping them through a restaurant, doing $35,000 hours, which is unheard of in the restaurant industry. Wow. And your skill sets get really good. Your head gets really big. It's high volume. It's fun. And now somebody pays me to go and open up properties around the world. And you meet rock and roll stars all over the place. You get to grow your hair long. My hair goes up right now, but it used to go long. I used to have 2.5 feet mullet. I had a long mullet. And I thought, this is the job of a lifetime. But at some point, I even outgrew that. I just wanted to have bigger impact and influence. And I had done a lot of stuff there in that hospitality world, but I wanted to go vertical, right? I wanted to be in other industries. And so that's when you get the idea of maybe I can speak and do that for a living and write. And, who knows, maybe somebody will want to buy a book. Well, I had to break out of hospitality. So now I get a chance to do that full time and podcasting. I got a marketing company, all that crazy stuff. But honestly, I'm using all of the tenets and I get to pull all of those levers in exactly what I'm doing now. So it's probably the perfect setup for me.
Cool. And that's a good thing to help people or remind people of. Our life will take many different paths, but the knowledge you gain from all those different paths really help feed into, what your dream job, if you will, now, or a great thing you're doing now, and it could grow into something else. So you never know.
Yeah. And I think your point, you look at your podcast and it is all about encouragement. I think that's a completely total valid point that I bet you there's some people working in a job right now, maybe you're shuffling papers and it's not your dream job, but that work ethic, you continue to crush what you're doing. You're going to get recognized, you're going to get promoted, or it's going to open the doors to something else. So, I've had some garbage stuff in my life too, but for the most part, I think of it very positively. And I just think what I'm doing right now, I'm going to just continue to slake that. And ultimately I'll move on to the thing that really is going to be my dream job. And I'm doing that now. So it's a great point.
And that's a good way to think of it is let's be a dragon slayer where you are, because people are watching you all over the world, all the time they're watching you. And that brings me into one of the concepts that you talk about is, in one of your videos, I was looking at some of the stuff off your website. It talks about it's got to be in your blood. And you're talking about the human behavior. Is positive attitude in there about that? Is that something that you see as ingrained in somebody that, you can't really teach a positive attitude, can you?
Well, you can get it early on. I'm a huge believer, Bob, that everything is learned behavior. So, unless you've got a pure chemical imbalance, everything the way you are is because you learned it somewhere. You learned it from your parents, from school, from your friends, from the playground, from religion, from lack of religion. So by the time somebody comes to me as like a 18, 19, 21-year-old who wants a job, they are the way they are. So if they never had sort of that positive disposition, they don't have the juice running through their veins, I think it's going to be really hard to try and get that to come out of them, especially if they're supposed to be, positive around other humans. If they don't have that ingrained in them and they didn't get that somewhere, it's going to be a real problem. And you joke about it, but it's the truth. I used to think I was a pretty good trainer. I've tried to get people to smile. I've tried to give them a smile. I've tried to give them and teach them about a personality. Doesn't work like that. You either have it or you don't. If you really focus all of your energy on it, you could, but if it's your natural gift isn't to do that, at some point you're going to slide back and be the way that you were when you were growing up, unfortunately.
And you do see that, especially in an industry like the restaurant industry or hospitality. They're on for the customer, and then it's okay, what's going on when they're not on.
Yeah.
And that can be a big difference, and that will overflow.
It will, but you made a great point earlier. People are still watching you. So at some point, people aren't stupid. The customer can see you a mile away. Your team members can see you a mile away. Your boss can see you a mile away. Yeah. You're either that way or you're not. And by the way, I shouldn't say it isn't teachable and trainable in a way that if I was a training and development guy, even today, I would still do that. I would do everything in my power to communicate, to train, to develop, to reward and recognize them if they did those things. But the reality is, if you don't want to do it and you don't have that in your background, it's just a harder uphill climb. And I think, again, you resort back to the way you actually are. So unless I've got a place for you, I don't know, in the back room where no one will ever see you, which is unlikely, I need people who have a killer personality and want to smile and be around other people.
And that's a great segue into the idea of positivity, because that is something that you share with people, and it's not always taught. I'm in the IT industry. That is not necessarily a positive industry, because you're always under the gun of getting something done, budgets restraints. You got to have it up 24/7, 99,999, redundancy. Everything's got to be up all the time. And then, oh, by the way, people are doing the work, and we're all people. So you got to remember, we're people first. And then, then there's the projects and the things that come about from that. But it's, a great point that, you've got something inside of you. And a lot of people can work hard. They may not be the best people to socially interact with things.
Right. Although, I do have a couple people that are in my background. Some of them are former bosses who really were, the hardcore muscling result type of person. They could manage through threats and punishment and fear and try and get the result by just absolutely muscling it. But at some point, I think they saw somebody else or other leaders or other awesome cultures and brands who are doing it without having to do all of that negative behavior, And I think there are some people that probably wake up, they have an epiphany, I guess, at some point and go, you know what, maybe the second half of my life, I'm not going to be the jerk. Like I think I can throw my arm around people and love on them. And maybe that'll get better results than the way that I used to do it. The carrot versus stick approach. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, oh, well, you're a lost cause.
No.
I think you've got to want to do it. And maybe something happens to you. It's probably an inflection point that you go, you know what? I should be a little bit more positive, and I can definitely get the results that I'm looking for and then some.
Right. Well, and that brings up a good point too, because as you're speaking to audiences and with your dynamic, the way you speak, you bring in energy, you bring in a smile, you're there for results.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I've seen this and had this happen to me too. When I'm speaking to an audience, there's either some, or you go into an audience and they don't want you there. They're sitting there. Why am I here? I've got to be here. Let's just get through this. Right there, you got to smile. That's great.
Yes.
So that starts it off like, okay, this is going to be a little better than I expected. But how do you get through some of that? Because that's just like in, life is going to throw things at you, and you got to be able to overcome them. What's your mindset going into some of those things?
Well, as a speaker, you have to forge through that. I remember what it was like to be on the other side. So I would say, I'm very lucky because I have a wonderful speaker agent. I used to be with the Speaker Bureau. I think most people who've seen the videos, they know what I'm about. You're totally right, Bob. I'm going to be loud and aggressive and high energy because there has to be a little bit of some of that edutainment, I like to say. I want them to push back from the table and go, that was awesome. That was a great use of my time. But I want them to have some laughs and some yucks along the way. So you try and find the balance, right? Yeah. I've learned now that there's a couple places. Ironically, I've discovered in corporate headquarters. So some CEO, president has seen me somewhere. They invite me to come into their headquarters. Now imagine what this is like. You're working in a cubicle, you're working in an office, and the top boss has said, we're going to get everyone together. And I brought in this outside third-party speaker. Right. I know what the majority of these people are thinking. They're like, are you kidding me? I got work to do. Can I slide out of here? Some of them, I could see them sneaking out of the back of the room. Yeah. It's clear to me there's maybe 3 or 4 people that are truly interested. And they're usually the executives, right?
Yeah, right.
And I get that. But I still go, somebody is paying me to be here or invited me. It might be something philanthropic. And I go, they think that I'm going to bring some value. So I'm going to bring the thunder. I'm going to absolutely do what I would normally do as if I was in front of 1,000 rabid fans. It just happens to be 100 people, of which 4 are interested and 96 aren't. Yeah. I'm okay with that. Yeah. What happens out of that is you will convert a couple people that will be thinking to themselves, I really didn't want to come into this, but I'm so glad that I did. That, again, was a great use of my time. And sometimes that leads to other engagement. Sometimes it opens the door to something you're not even thinking about, and it'll present itself, 5 years down the road. So for me as a speaker, you can't get bollocksed up on that stuff. I used to, because you want to convert everybody. You're looking around, if somebody's talking or not paying attention, right, it kills you. But I've gotten to the point that I'm going to go in there and do my thing, and hopefully it's valuable enough that somebody goes, man, that was awesome. I'm so glad that I stuck around. If I was on the other side, man, it's harder to say this and to actually do it. I just think so many great opportunities that present themselves, people aren't taking advantage of. I would look for every opportunity to think this is a learning moment, and I'm going to take 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is out of my day. The boss asked me to be here anyway. I may as well engage. I ought to be a lifelong student of life. Let me jump in and see if I can get something out of it. I know that's hard to say because people are just gonna be thinking, man, it's lunchtime. I got emails, I got whatever. But as a speaker, boom, I'm going right for the jugular.
Well, and that's the whole thing is, why not make the best of it?
Yeah. Okay.
You might get a free lunch out of it. Okay, that's great. That's cool. You get some great information. Okay, I'm getting an education. I'm getting some some ideas, some points of things that I can take back to enjoy my day or grow what I'm doing. So
exactly.
It always cracks me up when you speak and you get the room and the people start coming in and they sit in the back of the room. And then the first front half of the room is, half empty or empty. I go to the back of the room and I'll start speaking back there. It freaks people out.
Well, if I have a choice, and if I get a hold of the client ahead of time, I let them know to try and put them in smaller tables. It could be rounds or semi rounds or whatever, because I'm quite mobile. So if you see the videos, I'm moving around behind. You can't do that in a big theater. When you start getting past about 300-400 people, if I'm on a big stage, that's different. But if I've got a smaller group, like 100, I'm all over the place. You don't know where I'm coming from, beside you, behind you, in the round, wherever it is. So I'm with you. Like they think that it's the back of the room and it becomes the front of the room real
Yeah,
quick.
exactly. I love doing that.
Perfect.
Now,
Look at us being sneaky.
yeah, right. Well, like you said, it's bringing that thunder, bringing that value for that audience that you're there for. Why
Yeah,
not give them the best you have to offer? That just makes your presentation better, makes their knowledge better, and makes our world a better place. So that's what it's
no
about, is
doubt.
sharing that greatness.
No
So good
doubt.
job with that.
Thank you.
What's interesting too is change has to be accepted from the top. And it was interesting you mentioned how the CEO would bring you in. How do you make sure your ideas and thoughts are not only accepted at the top, but then carried throughout the organization? Because I think that's a key piece you talk about, even, is that idea of making sure the culture changes. And that's a big change. How do you help people do that?
Yeah, so when I first was thinking about leaving Hard Rock, and I've been gone now for about 9 years, I knew that if I was going to jump out there, this is probably one of the main ideas that I had to grapple with. Like, who's going to hire you? What are you going to bring to the party? Those types of things. And I made a choice. That first book that I wrote, and the things I really talked about were organizational culture. So I wrote that so that a business owner, a franchisee, a CEO could get a hold of that and go, wow, there's a lot of meaty stuff in here in a ton of areas on how I could ramp up or amp up my culture. I think in a lot of ways, the ones who now get it, they're looking for content like that. They're looking for resources.
Right.
And Merriam-Webster listed culture as their word of the year just about 5-6 years ago. So I was very lucky to be riding the tide of talking about this when it became really prevalent, because honestly, Bob, this wasn't a big deal. You go back 15-20 years ago.
Right.
You throw down the culture card and say, hey, let's do something because it would be fun and cool and it's the culture. And, the CEO, the executives are laughing at you if it isn't tied to business results or the strategy or whatever. So, now I think there's way too many awesome companies out there who are doing a fantastic job that you can now point to and say, it is because of the people. It's because of the culture, the behaviors that we talked about. So I think from a CEO standpoint, they're starting to come around, and the ones that aren't are figuring out very quickly, they are going back to that muscling the result. They might be hanging their hat on the product or that they were first to the market, but all it takes is for you to focus only on that, and then whoop, 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 people are going to be passing you by because they're doing so many better things. So I think from the top down, it is something that I always wanted to hit first. But now in my next book, when I'm saying leadership that rocks is the next book, I'm focusing on up and coming and new leaders. Like, I wanted to get to them, and I wrote it specifically for these new people, saying, okay, I've now indoctrinated myself, or I've stepped into a company. I didn't start it. I'm not the boss. I might not even be a director level. I might not even be managing people, but I'm a new leader. So I have responsibilities. How do I affect the culture? How can I be a catalyst for change? So I focus really on that. And there's a lot of things that you can do in that, because that, again, is another question that people have. They go, I'm just a brand new guy or girl. How do I really make a difference? And can I make a difference? So these two things that you talk about, I want to go both directions. I started from the top down and said, if I can get to these people, that's more impact and influence for me. But now I'm starting to go from the bottom up and say, let me get some of the newer people so I can stop the bleeding. If they're in charge of ultimately hiring or maintaining or communicating or rewarding, recognizing, even terminating people, if I can get to those people first, when they become a business owner or an entrepreneur, now I've had way more influence in the world. And that's really what drives me, honestly.
That is pretty cool, because they're closer to the source, if you will. I mean, they definitely know the heartbeat of what's going on. They understand the people. They're there with them in the trenches, if you will. That makes a big difference. When's that book coming out?
So it comes out May 18th is the release date. I should have physical copies in hand here in a week or two, but I'm pretty excited about it. I actually took my first book and deconstructed it. So it's a pretty heavy. I actually have a copy here. This is the one I have. It's a hardcover and it's color, and it's a monumental pain in the butt to take anywhere with me. But I knew that I had a lot of dense content. Again, I thought it was probably my only book, and I would have been happy with that. I'm proud of that thing, but it had some stuff around service, a little bit on employee engagement, and then the big thing was around leadership. And so I wanted to carve those out to have smaller, thinner, black and white versions that would be easier, not just to travel with, but sometimes I get hired just to talk about employee engagement, or just
Right.
talk about customer service. And so instead of them getting the big behemoth of a book, I decided, let me focus some targeted topics on that. So Leadership That Rocks, that's one that comes out in May.
Okay. Cool. It sounds like there'll be more after that.
There'll be three. I've got three that I carved out of that. I don't know if I have any more in me. That might be it.
You'd be surprised. You never know.
Yeah,
You know?
that's true. That's true. You get the bug in you. Hey, this book's 8 years old, so it took me 8 years to do a follow-up. So
Right. Well, and
we'll see.
it's the content that, like you said, the content rocks. So hey, let's go for it.
Yeah, I like it. I like your thinking, man.
Well, it's interesting too, because one of the things you talked about in one of your presentations, in the Service That Rocks presentation, you got some key points that you talk about. Becoming customer obsessed, delivering personalized experiences, and avoiding acceptable mediocrity. That kills me. Acceptable mediocrity. What is that?
So ironically, you and I probably are part of the problem for a variety of reasons. So I think if we were to go back in time, let's say 20, 25 years ago, when you would go out to, let's say, eat dinner. I mean, you could do this with anything. When I go to eat, drink, shop, stay, play, do whatever it is,
Right.
I am constantly on the hunt looking for people that are doing something spectacular because I'm a fan. Like I'm an experiential starved consumer. I am waiting for people to do something different with me.
Right.
So when I was on the other side, providing that experience, you know, and I was lucky. I worked at Hard Rock. We had some people who could bring something awesome to the party. I love these people that were just misfit toys out there in the real world, but we found a home and it was awesome. So to be fair, I have to sort of put myself in that category to go, okay, maybe it's a little bit unique, but the reality is every customer, every guest, every consumer wants to be treated special.
Right.
And so what happens 25 years ago, when you and I would go stay at a hotel or eat at a restaurant or whatever, service was pretty daggum good. Like people were pretty happy with what they got. And then something happened. And I don't know what it is, but somehow people really got comfortable with just providing mediocre meh attitude, you know?
Right.
And it's like everybody in the retail space, the hotel, the restaurants, they all got together in some big old conference and said, you know what, let's be mediocre for a while just to see what that's like. Because that's what happened. Like I am blown away. Me personally, I am blown away when I see awesome, fantastic service being presented, because it's become now not the norm. It's rare when I see that because there's this sort of lackadaisical attitude. And so what happens is at some point where I used to be a letter writer, I used to fill out stuff online. Like you can go and do online reviews regardless of whatever industry it is. I sometimes would call over the manager. I'm not talking about when things were really bad. I'm saying when they were just mediocre. I'm that guy. I would want them because, you know, this is where I shop. This is where I stay. This is where I eat. So I always wanted it to get better. But, you know, at some point, somebody starts to push back and now there's conflict and somebody's upset or the manager doesn't care. You never hear a response, you know, from whatever it is that you're sending off TripAdvisor or whatever.
Right.
So at some point I stopped doing all that stuff. So you know what I do? I lowered the bar. I lowered the bar because I used to put people on my no-go list. If they were just mediocre for me, I'm like, they're not getting my money. Like I would draw a line in the sand. But Bob, I'm running out of places to eat and shop, you know? So I go, la, 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 la. I put my fingers in my ears and I go, listen, if I could get in and get the stuff, or even better, this is why third-party delivery and online sales is so much bigger, because I don't have to deal with the human. So I call this acceptable mediocrity. I think people now have lowered the bar so much that we accept, we endorse its continuance. Versus drawing a line in the sand and going, I'm not going to spend money, or I'm going to say something to somebody. It's become part of the problem. And me, I will raise my hand and say, yeah, I'm like that. And so now my places to go are much smaller, but I know it's going to be practically guaranteed awesome service.
Well, and with the way the pandemic is, I think that's contributed to that. Like you said, you don't have to deal with a human because, you know, you can't breathe on anybody, you know, and now it's going to be, when you go back to those restaurants eventually, that service is going to be key. That interaction with the customer is going to be so critical. How are we looking at, okay, there's a source of growth for our business right there in front of us. How do we treat that?
So here's the thing I think about too. So I live in a state where, you know, the pandemic practically, you know, we pretend like it didn't even exist. So everything's back open, right? This really did frustrate me that when we got to a point that we started opening up restaurants. I know we're talking a lot about hospitality. All the stuff that I talk about transcends that. You can apply it to anything. But in this case, when it comes to restaurants where people weren't able to go somewhere and now all of a sudden they are, what blew me away is that there are still brands out there that just seems like they don't care. They had a much smaller staff. They could have rocked people's worlds. They had to convert. Some of them are now thinking, do I do drive-through? Do I do third party? Do I do takeout? Like if you didn't have takeout or catering, some of these places would not have made it. And yet sometimes when I got into their orbit and they're not bending over backwards and loving on me, you know, I want to fall madly in love with the brand. And this is what I get from them. Again, it's very frustrating when I'm like, you haven't had business for 8-9 months. Right. How is it that you can't do something spectacular? So it does frustrate me. I think the really good ones, they just became even better. And the ones that already sucked before, they're in the ditch. I mean, they're really going to have a problem getting out of the thing. So it just, the pandemic revealed, I think, a lot of businesses out there.
Yeah. Well, you being in Orlando, I mean, there's a plethora of both on, you know, over there. So I'm in St. Pete. You got the smaller mom and pops, and you know, you see it everywhere. So in the businesses, I know businesses that they focus, what does the customer need? Helping them convert, you know, their business to that remote, you know, workforce. That's critical. One guy put his whole building up for sale. All his employees, 90 some employees, are now remote, and he's servicing his business better. He's servicing the customers faster. You know, what's that shift? What's that mindset to say, we can get through this and still be a positive force for our customers to grow our business?
Here, I thought you were coming with a negative story. I'm like, how tough is that? And yet this is somebody who got it right. They converted, they spun on a dime and said, I can do something different with my business. And those that made that shift, they're doing really well. I shouldn't say really well. They're figuring it out and they're able to survive so they can get back. And honestly, some of the systems they had to put into place will probably stay. They probably found some really cool inefficiencies.
Well, and that's the best part is, okay, now you were made to shift. You were made to say, okay, we got to look at this and look at it fast. We got to look at it hard, and we got to make the best decision we can quickly. Exactly. A lot of businesses don't like to do that. No. And it brought it out into light. Even people at home. Okay, now what are we going to do? Well, how about this? How about that? You know, you pivot and you shift and you do what you got to do. Instead of going on vacation, I paid off a bunch of debt. Hey, all right, that's great. You know, now this year I can go on a real nice vacation. How about that? So how do you look at the, you know, what are you looking at? What are you focusing on? So
there's a phrase I use on stage, and I actually put it in my first, and I'll put it in the second book too. And I do think about this quite a bit. And you were alluding to this. I try and use some sobering language for people that just really don't like change. And I get that. Nobody does, but it's going to happen. It's one of those guaranteed things, right? Like death and taxes. It's going to happen. Change is going to occur. But the quote is, if you hate change, you're really going to hate extinction. You know, you have to change or you're going to die at some point. So, you know, I try and get more people to think, and this would probably be a nice learning for an upcoming and new leader is, change is going to happen. You need to lean into it and figure out what you can do or get in front of it. You can control the change. Maybe you're the one who makes the change before it happens to you. So I do spend time talking about being a culture catalyst or a catalyst for change. But I go back to that mindset of, listen, if you don't like it like this, it's going to suck when you're not around. Being extinct isn't cool. It isn't fun. So
you just ask the saber-tooth tiger.
Exactly. Just ask a dinosaur. But you can't because they're, you know.
How about that? And it's interesting you say that because there's guarantees in life: death, taxes, and change. All three of those are gonna happen. So
they're gonna happen. That's right. That's right. I added that one in there.
Well, and I think you covered it in this because you talk about becoming customer obsessed. You want to make sure that customer has a good feeling with your brand, with who you are, with your service. You provide that with what you do. You give them that gusto, that, you know, okay, this guy's got some cool stuff, and it's hard hitting. It gets, you know, it makes you think. And that's what we have to do, I think, in our society is let's take a minute and think. You know, so many times people don't want to think. Again, that's another one you have to do if you want to change.
I agree. And you know, I think your audience is probably broader than this. My mindset, what I'm working on is organizational culture. Like I focus on companies and trying to get them to think and behave differently. I do some one-on-one stuff, but the majority of the stuff I do is enterprise wide. And so when I think of that mindset, I'm trying to get to the frontline employee. And again, because it's behavior based, you're not really going to change a lot of people. I'm hoping that I can motivate them, inspire them, get that aha moment for them to make the change on their own.
Right.
Again, if they haven't been brought up like this and they haven't learned it, it's going to be a tougher get. But here's my mindset. That guest customer obsession mindset is one of the greatest things of all time. When I see, I love doing this. I go inside of a really slow hotel on, let's say, a Monday afternoon at 3:00 in the afternoon, or go inside of a restaurant after the lunch, it's 4:00 in the afternoon, go watch the employees. When people are moving at blazing speed, not because they have to, but because they want to, when they've got a sense of urgency, when they've got attention to detail, there's no pieces of trash around them. They're high-fiving each other. Like I know a great culture when I step into it. And so it isn't when it's Saturday night and it's crazy and the place is on fire, everybody steps up and we're probably going to do a fairly good job. It's when those moments are a lot slower. And I've been in places where, let's say, they've been open for 10 years and it's slow, as a dime. And I look at the people that are in there and I go, this place doesn't have a lot of love, but I can also be in a place that's been open 10, 15, 20 years. And people are walking around, like I just described, sense of urgency, attention to detail, eye contact, genuine care. You actually really care about the customer. That's a pretty healthy environment. And so I'm looking for businesses that are doing that, and what can we do to amp it up? And also the ones that are in the ditch that need a little bit of love, and they can revolutionize. They can absolutely change things for the better, but you need people who can do exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder to everyone, because I think it's much needed in our society. Just that idea of recognizing people again, knowing that, hey, we're all in this together. Let's do the best we can. That means I share with you, you may share with me. Let's make this a great day, because we all get a chance to live on it. So why not, make the best of it? So,
exactly. I love that.
Great. Well, tell us more where people can find out more about you, your products. And you got the one book out, you got another one coming out in May. Tell us more about where they can get a hold of you.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. So probably all roads initially lead to my website, which is Night Speaker. So that's my last name, KNIGHT, nightspeaker.com. You can see a bunch of stuff on there, getting books and training programs, and there's some video clips. And some people want to use that website to go and find out how to hire me to come in and do some stuff for your organization. I'd be happy to do that. The new book will have its own website landing page. It'll be leadershipthatrocksbook.com. It's actually up and running, and I should have some pre-orders available in about a week or two, depending on whenever this gets posted. So those are really the two spots, and I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. If you just want to yak with me, throw me a question, or see if I can't help you out, I'd be honored to do that as well.
Awesome. And we'll put all that in the show notes, because I know some great resources out there. I've reviewed his webpage. Check out his webpage. He's got some great video links on there. They're short clips. He's got his blog out there. He's got his podcast that he does as well out there. So check out what he's got. It's some good stuff. So
thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
Well, not a problem, Jim. And I just want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. Really appreciate your insight and what you offer, not only your customers, but the world. That's what we're here for.
You got it, my friend. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks.